There is some background noise, but hopefully you'll be able to hear me. So we're talking now from ABA, which is Applied Behavior Analysis, I believe. And it's basically a type of training that is used often on special needs or autistic children or anyone, but really you could use it on adults or anyone else. And I got this from when I was training for this company called AppliedABC. I was doing a job for them. So the idea to keep in mind is that ABA is Applied Behavioral Analysis, where you use application of behavior principles to enhance one's development and produce significant results. Now you could use this on yourself or others. You have to use a reinforcement to shape the behavior and use direct observation, measurement, and functional analysis of the relations between environment and behavior. So, and the first, behaviors are what people say and do. They're observable, they're measurable. And you have to remember, we're using some premises here. First of all, we could shape a child's behavior by using reinforcement immediately after the undesired or desired behavior, either every time or sometimes, very frequently or less frequently, by one, presenting an action or object that will strengthen that particular behavior. For example, praise, food, iPad time, a break. It doesn't work if the child is already satiated with that, but it doesn't only have to be a child. So this is called a positive stimulus, also known as when the stimulus or the desired, also known as the desired item or action. That's a stimulus, is added following the behavior, which then increases the likelihood that that behavior will occur again in the future. A short break or a treat after they complete or perform a task. We do this for ourselves as well. In the first, and then number two, there's another kind of reinforcement, which is the stimulus is removed, increasing the likelihood of the desired behavior in the future. We call that a negative stimulus. So, for example, a stimulus is removed, and it could be frequently or less frequently, it could be every time or sometimes, and it's a reinforcement, but it's a negative reinforcement. The negative stimulus is will cause the behavior to occur. Now we could say we take something away, or we could say we stop something that is enjoyed. There's two ways of doing it. When both a desired and an undesired behavior occur at the same time, we don't want to reinforce the undesirable behavior. So we have the child do an easy task where that's not related, or the adult, and we give, or ourselves, and we give the positive reinforcement. Now, before we move on, I want to say the first few days are extremely important. That's when you're pairing, you're building a rapport, and you can then provide access to the reinforcers and become yourself a reinforcer. You make things more fun and use as few direct or indirect demands as possible, and you can introduce demands later and slowly. And you can also remember you have to take data on how it goes, correct and incorrect responses from the other. So what is the goal? The goal could be when you run a program, the space has to be clear of distractions and the student is ready to work and has chosen a reinforcer, whether it's stickers, chocolate milk, whatever. What we call the discriminative stimulus is something that we're saying is an instruction or another antecedent, something that precedes, comes before the behavior, before the response. The antecedent invoking response. In other words, a point to X command or demand, and then you hold up the reinforcer, or you hold up something that they want, or a peer enters the room. So this is a stimulus, a discriminative stimulus, an instruction or something that an evoker, and they respond. When we say the word mand, it's also often referred to as request. This is the lingo that's used. Prompting is a method used to make the learner form incorrect to correct responses. This has multiple positive, advantageous outcomes. So prompting is when you're sort of giving them little nudges in the right direction, kind of, you would say. So it lowers their frustration, helps the individual learn more efficiently, and increases the rate of responding. Practicing errors impedes learning, and prompts minimize errors. So if they keep making errors, they're not going to learn as well. But if you prompt them in the right direction, it could minimize errors and increases the correct responses. The goal is for the student to complete independently without prompts eventually, or the learner. Physical prompts are models for the student's body. It models the student's body. It moves the student's body to model correct response immediately after the discriminative stimulus. For example, you would show cars and then sort of point their hand towards the orange cars when you're asking about the orange cars. A gesture is where you don't use the student's body, you use your own body. You point your motion to the correct response. Like you say, where is the traffic light? And you kind of like point to the traffic light, and then they have to look for where you're pointing. And verbal, you say the correct response, like you say what it is. Like, the panda is black and white, and then you ask them later, the panda is, and then, so in other words, they start to get prompted in the right direction. Maladaptive behaviors, we'll give examples like anything that you find to be maladaptive, which is not adapting properly. It's maybe even destructive or dysfunctional. We say arm waving, staring at a fan, screaming, chewing their clothes, physical aggression to themselves or others. They do serve a function. That's what we have to remember. So, for example, the father says no more candy. The kid screams. The father gives more candy. So screaming there served a function. So what is the antecedent? What happened immediately before the screaming? They were told no more candy. What's the behavior? The behavior occurs, right? That's the screaming. And then the consequence, what happens immediately after behavior? So they get the candy. So now we're reinforcing screaming to get candy. So I see people with their dogs. When their dog is barking at a stranger, they then try to distract them by giving them treats, but then that will cause the dog to bark more often at a stranger. So extinction is when is used to decrease or eliminate occurrences of negative behaviors, which we might call a problem, maladaptive behavior. We want to eliminate screaming. So once we know why it's happening, we can replace a behavior with a socially appropriate alternative. Tact is labeling. Like, I will tact dog means say dog when presented with a picture of dog. So it's almost like attach or attract or like associate. Receptive is understanding language, and expressive is communicating language. And these are the kind of like the lingo of ABA. There's another topic that I wanted to share, which is from the Hachaim, who explains, and it's taught by Rav Yitzchak ginsburg, that despite the Torah commandments that a father not desecrate his daughter by instructing her to practice harlotry, the fact remains some girls engage in this act without being urged by their fathers to do so. Still, the Torah warns the parents to protect their daughter from straying to harlotry, because the character of the offspring depends on the parents, and there are 3 separate causes that cause a delinquent nature in offspring. So I know that it might sound like these children, it's all their fault, but that's why I'm sort of sharing this, like a deeper underlying thing that we could say, well, maybe it's related to the parents that the kids are this way spiritually. And I'm not saying either one, I'm just sharing more. So 1, if the time at conception the father was bent on the physical pleasure of the union with his wife instead of being motivated purely by the desire to preserve mankind as a result, and that's because God commanded us to, as a result, the child born from such a union may have an increased sexual urge. And as a child, we might see them act that out in other ways, not quite for sex, but in other urges, right? 2, if the mother's behavior is improper, then the lamb tends to become like the sheep. So we might say that, the similar idea. And 3, if both the father and mother had involuntary negative thoughts, even if both are pillars of piety, could cause issues, delinquency in the offspring. The remedy is 1, following the Zohar statement that righteous people have marital relations with their wives only on Friday nights, that if someone wants to make sure that the children he sires are of a holy level, he must first learn how to control his libido and put it exclusively to the service of God's commandment to be fruitful. Number 2, the Torah instructs to revere my sanctuary, alluding to the mother who is warned not to find herself suspected of infidelity, which would bring her to the temple to be given the bitter waters. And 3, the third reason, the Torah warns us not to turn to diviners or clairvoyants, because having knowledge of the impure coerces a person to involuntarily connect to it. The last area I want to share with is based on 2 parts, based on conversation with somebody named Michael, and also with Menachem Lasker. I don't remember who that is, but I guess I had a conversation with him. So it's about unothering ourselves. That's the theme. So there's many paths. I'm going to share 2 right here. And this is where we must accept that people-pleasing is a type of manipulation. If you can't accept that, then pause this video. And if you can accept it, then let's continue. So 1, we have to focus on grace, or how I am showing up. Not what I'm doing, but who I am while I'm doing it. 2, we have to focus on seeing rather than being seen. Self-expression, hitting the spot, like experiencing life with direct contact. So rather than othering ourselves, right? So this idea that we're seeing ourselves from the outside, or we're trying to be a role. Number 1, the path was trying to be a role. Number 2, it was being observed. So we're not performing. We let go of this performance and this being a role, and we show up in a present way, and we make direct contact with the actual experience, and we express ourselves, and we witness our own self rather than need someone else to be pleased with our performance. And then when we have character refinement, one, we let go of resentments, whether it's entitlement, whether it's for being well in terms of past. So entitlement, arrogance, self-righteousness, jealousy, which all come along with resentments. We become more entitled, arrogant, self-righteous, and jealous. And we recognize for being well in terms of the past, we could find wellness in our past. We also need to know our limits, acknowledging tolerance, pain, suffering, resistance, humanity, and ability for being well in the present, for bringing wellness into the present, and then connecting, aligning with our intentions, whether it's our choices, our willingness and desire, values and gifts, vulnerability. This is for being well in the future, our intentions. Sovereignty, finally, is letting others gain their confidence, discipline, strength, dignity, privacy, and resources for themselves. As we recognize we're sovereign, we don't need others to gain our own confidence, discipline, strength, dignity, privacy, and resources for ourselves. And the second thing I mentioned I wanted to share was just with Prayers with Michael, but really it got inspired by Asher Crispe on his website. He says God's voice pierces through everything. There's no echo. So nothing is other from God. So God's voice can go through everything. So, praying that God's voice speaking through us is for health, strength, seeing rather than needing to be seen, and most importantly, perpetual grace. I always loved that for years. To be able to complete the mission. And for the sake of the head to the toe, the beginning to the end, not having any hiding places for shame or humiliation or contempt. In the merit of being vulnerable, choosing God out of free will and dedicating ourselves to growing uprighteous, sacrificing in order to keep God's will. For example, stopping being in intimate relationship with an uncircumcised man, or stopping with non-kosher, stopping with free time, like on the journey. I'm just giving examples from my journey, but anyone can have these aspects in their own journey. And that's all for now. Bye-bye.